Welcome back everybody to the Bottomless Bag, your one-stop shop for homebrew items, weapons, knickknacks, and curios. Today we're going to be talking about the Quiver of Proliferation. This item is based off of the Pathfinder spell Abundant Ammunition, as always with a slight twist to it. This isn't intended to be a quiver of infinite ammo. I designed this item to give ranged characters, and specifically rangers, a little bit more versatility with their ranged weapons, as well as some flexibility in using magical ammunition for more effective combat and utility. So let's get into it. This finely made quiver looks only large enough to hold 2 or 3 arrows. The quiver is adorned with any number of gemstones or pearls along the body, and the number of gems is equal to the quiver's charges. After an arrow has spent at least 1 minute in the quiver, as the arrow is drawn, the player may expend 1 charge to instead draw an exact copy of that arrow. Each arrow includes any magical enchantment or effect on the original. I usually start this off as 3 charges per day, but depending on your DM, the character, and the fantasy level of the game, this can range anywhere from 1 to really infinite if you really want to make an infinite ammo. I usually set this so that the charges recharge at the end of a long rest, but if you want to instead lower the number of charges, have it reset on a short rest, that works too. It's really variable and you can play with it quite a bit. An arrow drawn from the quiver in this way will only last a few rounds. The intent wasn't to make an item duplicator. That'll be a different video. The other option is to just say that only 1 arrow can be drawn from the quiver at a time, and that way, if a second arrow is drawn, the previous arrow just vanishes. When the last charge is expended, player is left with what is effectively the original arrow. That is to say, it stays around permanently. This is one of those Ship of Theseus things, and just don't think about it too hard. This is a really great item for getting more uses out of finding those single-use arrows like explosive arrows, rope arrows, basically anything magically that's enchanted that is consumed on use. Instead of having to give somebody 50 magical bullets or 50 magical arrows, you could definitely just give them 1 magical arrow, and that's how they're usually found. They can more or less attune the arrow to the quiver, and then they have more than 1 use of it, assuming they don't use the original arrow. This is a great pick for any ranger, rogue, monk that's really trying to look for a bit more ranged utility. As a DM, I usually give this item to my low-level ranged characters, and that way when they find that magical arrow, they aren't terrified to use it, knowing that they can use it twice a day. I like to start out with the quiver only being able to hold 1 arrow, and then you have that little bit of why would you have a quiver with only 1 arrow, and then if they don't even know what the item is, they can fiddle around with it and kind of figure out how it works. And considering they can have it recharge at a long rest or a short rest depending on how much you want them to be able to use it, it has a lot of variables that you can switch to really fine-tune it for your specific use. But this makes them choose which arrow they're going to duplicate. I also eventually will have them find a way to increase the number of gemstones to upgrade the amount of charges per day, or I tell them that, they can pay an enchanter to increase the capacity. That way the item itself will scale with them as they go, and it's really good to find at any level because you can change that variety of play. There can also be an argument for this to be a bandolier or a knife belt. If you have a gunslinger, ninja, or monk that wants to use a consumable throwing item, a belt that only seems to hold 3 to 5 bullets and is adorned with crystal gems and studded along the side. If you feel like the daily uses of the magical arrows are too powerful, you can also make the gemstones break after use. So instead of them being a daily cooldown, it's a cheaper way to use specific magical arrows while still making the arrows permanently consumable in the process. After that, you can really start giving the rangers lots of varying and magical arrows that they can choose which ones they want to use, and at the end of the day, if they have to use their last magical one and it is consumed, it is. This just gives a little more flexibility to a class that a lot of people will argue is underpowered and or boring. I really do like the rangers, and I think the Unearthed Arcana is going to help them quite a bit, and these kind of items are a great way to get people interested in putting them back on par with ranged spellcasters. If you want to craft one of these things, you can use the Pathfinder rule set, which is this item can be crafted with the spell Abundant Ammunition, a quiver, and any number of pearls worth 500 gold each. As a DM, I usually put the limit at about 2+ their player level. Well, that way if they're level 5, they don't have 20 or 30 magical arrows for the price of 1. And just as a side note, there's a very special place in hell for people that want to use this with their black hole generating arrows. Shame on you. At that point, I don't even know what we're doing anymore. You might as well just be playing Halo. Or Breath of the Wild. They have black hole arrows. That's pretty weird. Yeah, maybe it's okay. Come on. You don't need that. It's just silly. Remember to keep your dice on the table, everybody.